to many of you, and good morning to some of you in the US. And I am actually now talking to Colin McMahon from Keypoint Intelligence, based in the US. So he's talking from the morning, I'm talking from the afternoon. It's great to have him, whatever time of day it is. As you know, we've had the last couple of sessions have really been looking quite deeply at the key trends that are going on and the opportunities and I guess the threats for us in terms of the print and packaging marketplaces. And we wanted to do this because actually, I think everyone going through the COVID crisis, going through lockdown, whatever level that is, are really just kind of puzzling over how to get back on to the road to recovery, how to start developing business, how to rethink what they're doing and reboot their business for the future. And that's why this is so important and so valuable for us to have this conversation with Colin. So good morning, Colin. Good afternoon from me.
Good morning, Fraser. It's morning over here, just barely, almost noon time.
Yeah, good. Okay, so you're going to share some slides with us and just give us sort of 10, 15 minutes of detail. We'll just go to the share slide.
Absolutely, happy to do it.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Okay.
So yeah, you're going to, the title of this, Commercial Print Packaging Trends, Business After COVID-19, Colin McMahon. Over to you, Colin.
Thank you, Fraser. So everything I'm going to say is obviously take it with a grain of salt. Human beings are historically very bad at predicting the future, and it's been about 100 years since we've had anything like this. And last time we had a massive pandemic, computers didn't exist, the internet didn't exist, automobiles were, just catching on, the Industrial Revolution as we knew it hadn't really happened yet in terms of mass production and things like that. So again, I'm going to give you my best. It's insight. It's based on some data, but I'm not claiming this to be 100% true. I'm not a prophet. So today we're going to be looking over just a few overarching trends. So our agenda, we're going to talk about the reality of COVID-19. We're going to talk about the period of transformation that it's likely going to trigger. We're going to talk about some trends in automation, trends in sustainability, trends in remote workflow, and the growing emphasis on cybersecurity, which is going to emerge because of this. So let's just dive right in. So first off, the reality of COVID-19. Now, in America, and in other places of the world, there's a tendency to be optimistic, to think big. I mean, there's already some states here opening up. We caution against this. This is a long-term outbreak. There is no data that indicates that COVID-19 is going to blow away within the next week or just disappear next month. Standard vaccine development time is 10 to 15 years. Now, we're not looking at anything like that, thankfully, but the hope is that a coronavirus vaccine will exist within the next, year to year and a half. Now, that's still a very short time, and that will be terrific when it does, but that is a long enough time to leave a large impact on businesses. We expect to see a lot of companies go out of business. We expect to see new companies emerge, and the companies that come through this will be the ones that adapt the best, and it is a long-term adaptation. You don't optimize your business to survive, in this pandemic mode for a month. Start thinking about surviving for 12 months, for 18 months. It's very vital that you think about this in terms of the time length that it's probably going to take up. It's likely going to come in waves. We're already seeing this. There's certain countries that handled the first wave very well that are unfortunately now being hit by a second wave. Again, it's very similar to the Spanish flu pandemic, which also came in waves. And the effects of this will be felt for years. I've talked to some colleagues and they're like, do we want to keep this do we want to talk about COVID in articles that might be green? Because we're all already really looking forward to the day where this is past. It's not happening anymore. But the reality is that just like the 2008 recession, we're going to be talking about COVID for a long time, at least economically, what it did. The good news is that it doesn't seem to be mutating. Again, I'm no science expert, I'm no disease expert, but I have been reading articles, just very trying to keep, track of what's going on. It does seem to be mutating slowly. So when a vaccine does come out, that'll be good. We can move on. But it will also likely hit cities and areas with more pollution harder. Now, part of this is just denser population, how the disease moves, how it changes, or how it infects people. And that we're also following these preliminary studies that show the possible link between air quality and the severity of the virus. Now, and that's going to be very important for our sustainability trend coming out of this. So let's take a look. So this is some of our data. Unfortunately, for a lot of analyst firms, the data, the forecast that we were doing before COVID hit, there's a giant caveat now. I mean, this was an economic altering event and a significant event. So as we saw that initially in 2020, a lot of companies were planning to make investments in hardware, investments in software, and then the first wave hit. And all of a sudden that changed. And companies went into power save mode. They went into resource management mode, like we need to keep profitable and just try to survive this ordeal. So we saw, over half of our respondents, and this is primarily wide format, so this is a little caveat there, but we're planning to invest in new equipment. Now it's less than 10%. We'll move on. And so what all of that signifies is that we're in a period of great pause. Right now, there's very little business, like new business going. People aren't seeking out new business. They're not seeking out new equipment. They're not looking to make new investments just yet, unless there's a really solid guaranteed return on investment. So during this time of pause, the print industry, along with many other industries, will start to undergo a period of transformation. Now, I don't know if you've ever read, but I've written a couple articles on Industry 4.0 versus 5.0, and some people have asked, are we entering Industry 5.0? It's a yes and no, because Industry 5.0, a lot of the people who champion it, when asked to give a definition, their definition sounds a lot like Industry 4.0. So, Fraser and I'm sure we can discuss semantics of that in the chat section. But to me, no, we're still in Industry 4.0. We're just going to become a truer 4.0. So what does true Industry 4.0 look like? We're talking about smart factories. We're talking about lights out manufacturing, or plants that have no human presence in them. It's all remote workflow. We're talking about smart manufacturing habits, and we're talking about the industrial Internet of Things technology. And trends that I believe will accelerate coming out of COVID are trends in automation, trends in sustainability, digital or remote workflow, and cybersecurity. So let's get right into it. All right, so automation. Automation hinges on the industrial Internet of Things. So most of us, I actually don't have my phone on me for once, but everyone lives now in a world of IoT because we have these smart connected devices. Actually, despite not having my phone, I'm wearing a Fitbit, which is another IoT device. Now, in the industrial Internet of Things, this means, printers. This means all sorts of these different types of sensors, all sorts of conveyor belts. Everything is being hooked up to work together. And this is the backbone of automation. If these devices cannot talk to each other, they cannot function together. So if you don't have an internet connected device, or a device that can't connect to the network, your automation efforts are going to be greatly hampered. And research that we've done showed that going into 2019, a lot of print companies were very stagnant on their automation efforts. They viewed it as, yeah, that'll be nice 5 years down the road, but it's not an immediate priority. Well, guess what? Now you can't fully staff your print factories. You can't fully staff, even small print shops. You've got to maintain social distancing and safe working conditions. So automation becomes so much more essential in helping to keep that number down. Even also just in terms of cost-saving measures, as you can see by this chart from the McKinsey company, labor costs are going up across the board, whereas automation, robotics prices and automation prices, they're falling. This technology is not new anymore. It's being mass produced. It's being generated at a large scale level. So you can get these parts. You're no longer in the cutting edge if you're looking into automation. Now you've got to adopt now or risk being left behind. And another way that I believe COVID's going to impact this, and I'm going to come back to this later too, is that the average age of US print operators is 44. And men tend to be older than women. Now, this makes them a higher risk for COVID, which we've seen in all the data. This targets older people more than younger people, or the effects are more severe in older people than younger people. So any problems that we have with an aging workforce are likely going to be aggravated by what we're going through right now. So automation has fewer touch points, which requires less specialized staff and less people involved in the factory. Now, even some of the companies that we've talked to who are like, yeah, no, we've automated. Have you really? Because when we're looking at only 1% have full automation. And now all automation is good. And I don't mean to, if you're working on it, if it's still a work in progress, that's great, awesome. But if only one segment is automated and other segments aren't, then you're still creating these silos, these different workflow silos, and you're slowing down the work, and it's not fully optimized. And really, you're making the investment in automation without achieving its maximum results. So it's really just money that you're leaving on the table. That with true and full automation, you will be able to maximize your return on investment and lower your operating costs, which is essential right now and probably will be for the next year or so. So to move on to the next trend we're talking about, that's sustainability. Now, the environment was already increasingly on people's minds before COVID. We saw that with climate change, and we saw that with just the desire to, recycling efforts, everything like that. People want to save, they want to reuse, they want to lower their carbon footprint. Now, with COVID and the studies that are coming out and the news that's coming out, air quality is probably going to be much more important because there does seem to be a definite link. If you live in an area with bad air quality and you get coronavirus or one of the coronaviruses, the results are going to be much worse because it's a respiratory illness. And if you already have your lungs in damaged state because you're dealing with bad air quality, well, that's so much worse now. Now, the good news is the print industry has been making significant strides to be more sustainable. There's been the growth in digital printing, which, better for smaller batches and also creates less waste. There's been a greater ink variety. We see the rise of UV and aqueous inks that will help, they cut down on the toxic waste residue left from inks. Vegetable-based inks are becoming more popular. But there should also be a strong focus on proper material sourcing. So pretty much, if I'm a printer, and I want to be eco-friendly. I want to promote my products. I want to promote my businesses. I'm a sustainable business, but I'm not properly sourcing where I'm getting it from, then that's a natural pitfall. If I'm getting my equipment from someone who doesn't care about the environment, that can still come back to bite me, even though I'm trying to make the effort. So I would say that for print companies going forward and, who want to stress the increased sustainability, be proactive in the public sphere, really highlight anytime you can to be sustainable. And it's all about eco-friendliness. And it needs to be prioritized completely across the life cycle. So as soon as onboarding starts, the entire, life cycle of that product creation, you've got to show at every phase, here's how we care, here's how we're reducing, here's how we're trying to make it better for the environment. We don't want or any print contributing. There's always been, it still exists kind of that decades old, print is bad for the environment because you cut down trees. It's like, well, if you have sustainable forest practice, then print is actually a lot better than plastics, which are currently overrunning everything right now. So information like that needs to come to the forefront, and I believe it will be more important than ever after COVID. Let's talk about remote workflow. Now, one of our most recent surveys, only about half of print service providers had any sort of digital workflow management software in place. Like going into COVID, that's not great. So it's tough to say right now. We're obviously, I'm not in my office. Fraser's not in his office. We're in a pandemic workflow, and it's hard to say how much of that will continue once it ends. Will people return to offices and congregate more in places like plants and things like that? Probably, very likely. Will it go back to normal? Probably not completely. So the reality after COVID will probably be somewhere in the middle. Now, digital workflow tools make it easier for remote collaboration and decentralized processing, which is huge. So we're talking about cloud-based software architecture. So architecture is not dependent on on-premise servers, not dependent on on-premise, processing power. It just makes it so if, say, you're operating and then the government says, you can't operate on site anymore, then you can transition to full remote that much easier. And many cloud-based platforms are sold or marketed as software as a service. So there's not a big immediate investment cost. You can and they will help you with installation, by the way. A lot of software providers to the print industry know the importance of helping. And to go back how these are connected, if you're not automated, you can't do this. Like if your machines can't talk to each other, you can't have improvements in remote workflow or improvements in digital workflows. It's just not going to happen. If you have to put people on site, it's not working. Now, this is something I'm very interested in. So technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality, they make it easier to be more productive regardless of the location. So when we're talking about, look at that, the lower thing, a lot of people still think of VR and AR as gaming. It's so much beyond that. Like, yes, there are game elements. Yes, People use it for social functions, but what we're already seeing is an enormous increase in the demand for remote collaboration software, where virtual reality, software solutions like Glue, which is pictured in the upper right, which helps to create sort of a virtual replacement for the meeting, a place where you can still go into a room and feel like you're in a room with people. People can talk, they can collaborate. They usually have the presence of those whiteboard things, so anytime someone can take control of a conversation and be like, oh, look at this idea, or bring up a presentation and throw it into the room, rather than, I love Zoom and Skype, but there's limitations to full engagement there. Usually one person talks, and if too many people talk, then no one can understand what's going on. But with platforms like Glue and other VR alternatives, they are seeing that remote collaboration is better and makes companies more productive. Augmented reality, we'll push into that now. It's the necessity of knowledge democratization. So remember when I said aging workforce, and I said there's going to be turnover. Well, that's probably going to be at least somewhat accelerated. So augmented reality, what it does, or what it is essentially a new method of communication. So when you think about what it would happen with a specialized worker in the past, they write down their notes. If they're really great, they'd be asked to write a manual, and maybe they could train one or two people before they retired. Then that's it. The knowledge that they had, the decades of experience they had, is lost primarily. There's only very limited ways to retain that knowledge. With augmented reality, we have the potential to retain an incredible amount of information. Pretty much, if you're wearing an augmented reality headset, it sees what you see, it can record what you see, and it can understand, at least to some extent. It's not, we're not talking augmented reality. Artificial intelligence, but it can understand what's important. What processes do you do every day? What do you repeat? What needs to be essential for helping to create that training guideline of the future? So augmented reality is going to be huge, probably in the next 10, 20 years, maybe even quicker with COVID, in helping companies streamline knowledge transfer and streamline knowledge democratization. That way anyone could be an expert within, well, not a full expert, but anyone could do an expert's job with very limited uptime or upscale onboarding time to help get them involved. We're already seeing it right now. Although many businesses still don't use augmented reality, and actually education levels around augmented reality are very low, so some people use it without knowing it, but we're seeing it used a lot in collaboration with multiple users, new employee training, or job and skill training, proving that there are already people doing this. The last thing I want to talk about today is cybersecurity. So pretty much everything I talked about requires some sort of digital workflow, or putting more in the realm of digital, putting more in the realm of automation. This has a lot of advantages, but it would be a lie to say it wasn't a little dangerous too. There are more data. If a data breach happens, there's more damage that can be done. So a data breach, in cybersecurity terms, happens with any connected device. So your network's only as strong as your least guarded device. If a malicious third party can get in anywhere, they can bring down the whole network in seconds. And unfortunately, cybercrime is very rapidly evolving. Part of this is just because the architects behind this, they're usually one person or two people or three people. They're not bound by bureaucracy. They evolve, they change, they look at what worked in the past, they look at what, oh, this is what this company is proposing doing now. Okay, we can just move ahead of them. So it's tough to be proactive, and you'll see the bigger tech firms, this is why they invest so much, but you can't afford to just react, because there's levels to this, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But while a basic cyber breach can compromise just your employee security, a more powerful one, a deleteware attack or a ransomware attack, or can just destroy everything. All of your business files just gone. Every little bit of your online infrastructure or software infrastructure can be wiped out if someone wants to. A dedicated denial of service attack can just bring production to a halt. And unfortunately, at least when it comes to print hardware, it's often seen as a weak point, because a lot of people don't even think, people think of computers and smartphones as connected devices all the time. Not everyone thinks of a printer. So people don't even think to check, oh, what's the cybersecurity measures present in this hardware? What's been built into the software package that comes with it? Sometimes the answer is not much. And if you're using machines, if you're buying machines, if you're promoting machines that don't have this and they can go on to cause real damage, it's not, impossible that you're going to be bound in some sort of repercussion. It will happen. To go back to the levels, because everyone's stuck at home and we're adapting to a new workflow, there has been a rise. Now, email scams are one of the lowest levels of cyber attack that you can get. I'm not saying they're not dangerous. I'm not saying they can't ruin your life. They absolutely can. But in terms of how complex they're very basic. But to just be aware, now this only tracks email scams, but all cybercrime is increasing. So just be very cautious of that going forward as you're trying to operate now more remotely and with more emphasis on digital workflows. You have to walk a balance. Yes, there's incredible advantages, but there's also potential problems. And as we see this, when we're looking at, where are PSP clients investing, the answer is not in IT infrastructure. It's very few people were, it was one of those things. We'll get to it. Now it's essential. Now it needs to happen. And moving out of COVID, this will be a huge importance. And that's kind of what I've got.
That's absolutely brilliant. And thank you very much, Colin, because I think what's been interesting about listening to you talk about the different elements is you've kind of taken us away from the sort of the traditional numbers around where, the number of print machines that are going to be sold and the technology, and you've really...
I could give you the number of machines that are going to be sold.
This has been
nothing
perfect.
but a guess.
Colin, this has been absolutely perfect, because I think for me personally, what you've done is you've said, look, guys, this is what the future of your business should look like, or will look like, or let's hope it looks like, because basically
right.
Everything that has happened up until this point and beyond is shaping the future. And we can kind of just carry on doing what we've always done, but if you don't evolve what you do, you just get caught out. And I think that's been really valuable. Right, I'd like to pick up on a couple of little things which have been quite interesting.
Sure.
So one of the things that's actually come up through the summit has been the mention, and I think you've touched on it several times, of the recruitment issue and the demographic, the age issue, the age that, our industry is unfortunately 55-year-olds than 35-year-olds. And I sense that this could potentially help print businesses to start thinking differently about their recruitment process and the kind of people they bring in. Would you agree or disagree, or what do you think?
I would agree with that. You need to make an investment one of two ways. Now, you need to either greatly expand recruitment efforts, primarily among, targeting, we're not talking any ageism or ageist thinking, but you need more younger people in there. And you need to either bring them in at a time when your older staff are more inclined and more able to fully and properly train them, or you need to start making investments, as I said, in AR technology platforms to help bridge that gap of like, okay, we're not sure we can hire 15 people right now. In fact, I'm going to guess that almost anyone cannot, especially when you're trying to control resources. So this could be a great time to make investments in the training tools so that a year from now, a year and a half from now, when things are finally fully back to normal, you will have that process in place to rapidly onboard people to help replace and supplement the any workforce that has been lost.
I think that's really interesting, because I think what we've heard again throughout the day is that people are saying, the reality is it's unlikely in the short term that businesses are going to be investing in technology. They won't be investing in new machines, for example. They might be investing in technology that helps their existing platform to be more efficient. So maybe software workflow, these kind of issues. And also, as you just said, the interconnectivity of the relationship between the customers and the different stakeholders. So it could be brand, could be pre-press, could be, the designers, it's the number of people, and kind of interconnecting that group. And that's really taking us in a different place, isn't it? From your traditional printer who's got a piece of machine, it's a B1, a B5, whatever it is, a wide format machine. It's just different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a changing time, and to talk about the point where there will be no investments. That's why a lot of the trade shows aren't even trying to do digital. Like Drupa's not trying to go digital. They know that they're not. people want to show off new technology there, but you want to show it off to a crowd who's receptive. And right now that just doesn't exist. So delaying it at least a year will hopefully help recreate those conditions.
Yeah. I mean, that is an issue for the marketplace, unfortunately. I think a lot of the manufacturers will face this, won't they? Because, I don't think we can sense that there's going to be machines being bought or developed.
Right. Not on large scale.
Interestingly, sorry, I just again want to pick your brains on this one. I spoke to someone earlier today from Bob's, and he was saying that what they've been doing, obviously, whilst this crisis has occurred, is they used to send their service team directly to a customer, and then they'd work on the technology there in the site.
Mm-hmm.
They're obviously doing this, remote servicing, and they found that they can still do it. And they've actually started to get their customers to start solving the problems rather than relying on it. Yeah. And this, exactly like you said, so that leads on to the augmented reality thing and the virtual reality, that potentially going forward, you won't necessarily need to travel. You could maybe manage it from where you are, and maybe the technology will be developed so that actually the customer can manage it rather than having to get a service engineer to come in and do it. Do you sense that?
Yeah, I think with a lot of these newer technologies, there's a big focus on intuitiveness. Obviously, you don't want to get, there's already people, if I say virtual reality or augmented reality, the eyes glaze over and they're like, oh, we're in science fiction land. It's no, it's happening now. And I will say, at least from the software developers I've talked to, they're very cognizant of this. They know that there's this preconception that we can never master it. It's too advanced. So they're purposely designing their platforms to be approachable, by the layperson.
Yeah, I think you're right. I guess my final question, and this is relating to the supply chain, and I think you've hinted at it that there's this sense that in the past we had all this long supply chain in place, and that there's this sense that what COVID has done is make people think a bit more locally and a bit more.
Yes.
For example, digital can play a strong and leading part in this kind of kickstart locally immediate response rather than kind of long supply chain. So I sense that some technology, particularly digital and particularly local, can benefit, can be good, and one-offs rather than long run. Am I right? What do you think?
I think you're right. We were already seeing shifts in how the supply chain operated. Just right now there's a lot that comes out of China and Asia, but that is always in the process of flux, mostly because of social political issues going over there. So we were already kind of seeing this move away from maybe this giant supply chain that's always global, always has to be global. Print providers were looking for ways to get around that. I see them looking a lot harder now at what's going on. As you said, digital is a real big factor in helping that. And I will say this is only tangentially related, but several of the print providers that we've talked to, the diversification of their products, if they're able to kind of snatch different workflows or they have a supply chain that's not so rigid, that can adapt easier, they seem to be coping better with what's going on, rather than the ones who are like, oh, this is what was in place. We can't change it without, a massive new investment. So we're just kind of bound to it right now.
I just took your slide back so that I could see you properly, because it's a shame, because obviously we were just.
All right, that's totally fine.
No, it's good. No, I think you're right. I think everything you said is right. So in terms of kind of wrapping up your thinking, and just would love you to be able to give some key takeaways. What's your sense? What's your kind of key takeaways from this particular presentation? What would you say?
I would say it's very important to be realistic. I think the company that develops, the print provider who develops a plan, a 12-month plan, an 18-month plan, will do better than the print provider who's right now developing a 1-month plan, a 3-month plan for how to change during COVID. What investments do I want to make? What do I want to look like when business goes back to normal? The more time you set aside, the more rational, I guess, in the thinking of like, okay, well, I've got this going on. It's a time for change. And if you budget your time, you make that change. And I think the companies that come out strongest from this will be the ones that go in with that mentality of like, 2020 is a year of change. We shouldn't be worried about making giant purchases or huge investments. We should be looking at optimizing ourselves for the future.
Yeah, I think I like that. This summit is very much about rethinking the process, not just about the technology or print as an industry or packaging as an industry. This is about rethinking your business. And I think that's really good. Sums up at the end of the day, the first day that we run, it's a good way of kind of just compartmentalizing what's been said a lot during the day, which is in essence, this is your opportunity as business people to really rethink what you are doing. Colin, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Really appreciate it. And hope to catch up with you sometime in the future in the flesh.
I hope so too. Thank you, Fraser. It's great to be here.